This is Green Street, the environmental health show, greenstreetnews.org, Patti and Doug Wood, and our worldwide network of experts here every week to bring you up to speed on what's been happening around the world that you need to know about and how you can live a safer and healthier life in this increasingly toxic world. Welcome back. If you think we talk a lot about plastic on Green Street, you're right. And that's because plastic is a worldwide scourge, contaminating our air, our water, our food supply, and our own bodies. Who among us said it was okay for the plastic industry to cause all this trouble? And who's going to have to pay for the damage? We all are, of course. The oil and gas industry, parents of the plastic industry, are busy making record profits. ExxonMobil, the largest oil and gas producer in the world, reported profits of more than $84 billion last year. That's about $254 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. And that's just their profit. So no wonder companies like ExxonMobil fight so hard against any legislation that might interfere with their profits. Today on Green Street, we're happy to welcome our friend Judith Enck of Beyond Plastics, who just went through the fight of her life trying to get the New York State Legislature to adopt a modest limit on the amount of plastic used in packaging. We're not even talking about the products themselves, just the packaging material. Anyway, that's all coming up on this edition of Green Street, but first, some of the news headlines of the week. Patti, what have you got for us?
Well, this is an article called Unsafe to Inhabit, the Toxic Homes of L.A. At first, the families whose homes were left standing thought that they were the fortunate ones. And while their neighbors sifted through the ash and twisted debris left behind by the devastating wildfires, they stepped through their unbroken doors into their living rooms where the throw pillows on the sofa rested exactly as they had left them.
They were the lucky ones, right?
So they thought. They used words like we're so relieved, we're blessed, and so on.
Yeah.
Mostly lucky, lucky, lucky.
Sure.
But weeks later, a troubling realization set in. Their homes may have been damaged in ways that are invisible. Everyday items become poisons when they are set on fire. A plastic shower rod releases formaldehyde. Burning rubber, whether from a garden hose or a car tire, emits benzene. Polyester found in fleece jackets and upholstered chairs unleashes carcinogenic gases. Printers, plasma TVs, and LED lights melt into a cloud of cyanide. Each of these toxic chemicals are known carcinogens or otherwise dangerous to human health. Scientists have found that even those who are far from the source of smoke can be harmed. After 9/11, residents living within half a mile of the collapsed World Trade Center experienced chronic respiratory illnesses, and those as far as 1.5 miles away had elevated rates of cancer, just like the emergency workers at Ground Zero.
So in the case of Los Angeles, these houses were contaminated by what was burning in the other houses around them?
Correct. And it was seeping into their homes through screens, cracks through the doors, and so on and so on. That's how it does. Homes are not completely airtight.
No. Boy,
this is something that's really important because wildfires are going to become more and more common, and the smoke from these fires, as far away as the middle of Canada, are reaching New York City and the whole East Coast.
Yeah.
So no one is really being spared from the smoke from these fires, and no one understands that that smoke
carries with it toxins. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of it is plastic burning.
Hello. Hello.
Here we go again.
Yep.
Okay. What else you got?
Chicago's plan to replace lead pipes puts it 30 years behind the federal deadline. Growing up in Chicago, a woman by the name of Shakina Perry knew not to trust the water coming out of her tap. We never used our tap water for just regular drinking, she said. Now, as a senior policy advocate for the National Resources Defense Council, Perry is part of a coalition that fought for stricter rules to force cities like Chicago to remove their toxic lead pipes faster. Last year, advocates celebrated a big win. The Biden-era U.S. Environmental Protection Agency mandated that water systems across the country replace all their lead service lines. And under the new rule, most water systems will have 10 years to complete replacements, while Chicago will get just over 20 years, starting in 2017, when that requirement kicks in.
Man, oh man, can you imagine you're living in Chicago and you know you're drinking out of, and you're bathing in water that's going through lead pipes, and we're just waiting for bureaucracy to get things going? I mean, that's terrible. You can't wait 10 years. How about kids who are, 3 or 4 years old now? They're supposed to be exposed their whole childhood.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
That's correct. And of course, children are
They're the
way
ones that,
more vulnerable to lead
course.
exposure than a grown person.
Yeah, developing brain is exactly where you don't want lead.
But the city's replacement plan, submitted to the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency in April and obtained through a public records request, puts it 30 years behind the timeline.
Jeez Louise.
Yep. Chicago's plan adheres to state law and an outdated EPA rule from the first Trump administration. It aims to replace the city's estimated 412,000 lead service lines by 2076, completing 8,300 replacements annually for 50 years, starting in 2027.
50 years. So some people are just not going to get new pipes for 50 years? This is okay with anybody? I don't get this.
Lead is particularly harmful to children, as we mentioned. It can hamper brain development and cause permanent intellectual disabilities, fatigue, convulsions, comas, or even death. Lead exposure during pregnancy can also cause low birth weight or preterm birth. And wow.
So let's wait. So let's wait 50 years.
What happens when we have urgent public health situations and the politics and the rules that are in place right now say, you know what? We understand it's urgent, but you're going to wait until 2076 to have your lead pipe replaced in your home.
You can pretty much guarantee that if this was Scarsdale or,
the Hamptons,
Manhasset, or some other wealthy, the pipes would have been replaced
Santa Monica.
Almost right away.
100%.
But the people in Chicago, the underserved, they can wait 50 years. 50 years. Somebody's head has got to roll for that. I mean, just really, how do these people sleep at night? I don't get it. All right. Thanks, Patti. The plastic crisis grows worse with each passing day. The amount of plastic we are all ingesting grows every day. The amount in the air, the water, the food supply increases every day. Pretty much every expert who looks at the plastic pollution problem comes up with the same conclusion. We have to turn off the plastic tap. Stop making the stuff, or we're going to drown and suffocate in a plastic world. Judith Enck is a former regional administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency and the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Beyond Plastics. She's been a friend of ours for many years, and we were delighted to have a chance to speak with Judith about the recent legislative battle over plastic packaging. We started our conversation with a recap of the fight and why it's so important. Here's our conversation with Judith Enck.
Well, we were really excited to be working on the most comprehensive plastics reduction bill in the country. And it's a model for other states, including California and other states that might be interested in acting on plastics. Although I want to come back to California for a moment because some pretty disappointing things are unfolding there on the plastics front. So this is a bill that would have required all single-use packaging to be reduced 30% over 12 years. Lots of time, a long runway to get to 30% reduction. The original bill was 50% reduction over 10 years, but we needed to weaken it in order to get it through the state Senate in New York last year. The second key provision is it banned 17 of the most toxic chemicals used in packaging. The entire PFAS family, lead, mercury, formaldehyde, etc. Third, it put a modest fee on all packaging, and that money would go to local governments to fund waste reduction, refill, reuse programs, and also municipal recycling. And then finally, it prohibited the very problematic practice of chemical recycling as counting as real recycling. So this definitely would have inspired transformational change in the way goods are packaged in New York. and I think elsewhere because New York is so big. So we got the bill through the New York State Senate 2 years in a row. It then is up to the state assembly to pass the bill. It went through every required committee, which is 4 committees. The day before the legislative session in the assembly was slated to adjourn, the bill passed through the Ways and Means Committee, the Rules Committee, which is usually a signal that a bill is poised to pass.
Yeah.
Here's the heartbreaking thing. We had enough votes for the bill to pass on the floor, but the Assembly Speaker, Carl Hastie, would not let the bill come up for a vote. I will tell you, I was camped out in the parlor of the State Assembly for many weeks, and we were joined by an unprecedented number of industry lobbyists. Lobbyists representing the plastics industry, fossil fuel companies, consumer brands. All the national lobbyists flew in. And at one point, I counted 22 special interest lobbyists that were very, very busy trying to convince Assembly members not to adopt this incredibly reasonable bill. We lost it on the last day. It's a huge disappointment. And while I was exhausted by the loss, I was also energized. And we are going to come back next legislative session and work even harder to get this bill over the finish line.
Wow. What aspect of it, Judith, do you think was the most widely objected to? Was it the 17 chemicals? Because I was concerned that we were really, that was going to get the real most attention.
It was 2 things. One is opposition to phasing out the 17 chemicals. At one point, there was like a quiet message to us that if we took the toxics provision out entirely from the bill, that the industry opposition would lessen. But that was a deal I certainly was not willing to make. It was not my decision. It's up to the sponsors, and they both instantly, wisely said no. The other thing is that the industry shared false information saying that there would be considerable price increases if this bill were to become law. That's absolutely not true. When you buy a product, typically only 2% of the cost of the product is the packaging cost. Consumer Reports, which is the gold standard on pricing issues, said no increase in prices are expected from this bill when it becomes law. And then the third thing, which was incredibly cynical, is the lobbyists were targeting members of the Black, Puerto Rican, and Asian American caucus. And one of the arguments that they were making is that consumer products purchased with SNAP and WIC would no longer be available on store shelves. And that is such a ridiculous threat because no company is going to give up the New York market. And it really felt uncomfortable the way the industry lobbyists were targeting members of the Black, Puerto Rican, and Asian American caucus with that particular point and not other legislators. But I will say it was a real disappointment that the chair of the caucus was not a strong supporter of this bill. Assembly Member Szilagyi of Nassau County was a co-sponsor of the bill last year. She spoke at our rallies at the Capitol. And this year, she would not give a straight answer on where she would come down on this bill.
Oh, boy.
You can just surmise why that is. And I think we all know, and all of our listeners probably know why that is.
So I'm intrigued by that 2% number. Can you talk a little bit about that, 2% being the cost of the packaging for an average product?
Yeah, those are USDA numbers. We also had a report from a Columbia professor who looked at EPR policies, not specifically the one we were pushing in New York, but EPR policies in general. And he said the largest price increase would be 25 cents per person per week, if that. Let's take the worst case scenario under his analysis, 25 cents per person per week for a cleaner and healthier environment and getting PFAS chemicals out of our food packaging. I'd say that's a bargain.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, was there enough talk? It seems to me that the fact that plastic is migrating in the public's mind from a worldwide pollution problem to a human health crisis. Now,
Yes.
was there enough emphasis, you think, made to the legislators about the fact that this really is the defining health crisis of the next generation?
Well, we certainly raised that point. I mean, we would share articles with lawmakers 3, 4 times a week. We would meet with them. We would raise the health issues. And, I was very honest when I started working on plastics issues and decided to organize Beyond Plastics. I was mostly driven by the environmental justice issues and the
Sure. Yep.
ocean impacts,
Yep.
because we're turning our ocean into a landfill.
Hmm.
And what's really happened in the last 2, 3 years is a greater focus on the health impacts that we all have small bits of plastics called microplastics in different parts of our body, including our brain, our heart arteries, our blood, our kidneys, the human placenta, male testicles, human breast milk. And I think lawmakers are just beginning to focus on how serious that is. Our assembly sponsor, who was an incredible heroine on this, Assemblymember Deborah Glick, after the bill didn't pass, she said publicly that she's going to emphasize the health issues more significantly. And I think that's really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too, because people are pretty freaked out about that. I mean, we probably get half a dozen calls a week, which is not that many, but nevertheless, it's more than we used to get from people saying, how do I get these microplastics out of our water? And we say the only way that we can be pretty sure of that is distillation. Well, distillation is, completely out of sight for, I mean, cost
Yeah.
wise for
Yeah.
most people.
Yeah.
And so we have all kinds of studies of, people going out there and just collecting rainwater.
Yeah.
And in that rainwater are these tiny little nanoplastics. And they're invisible. It's really hard for people to
Yeah.
get excited about something that they can't see.
Yeah, Dr. Janice Brainey at University of Utah did one of the earlier studies where she looked at dust in isolated national forests and national parks out west. She's a dust expert.
Yeah.
And she was really surprised at the microplastics that are being sent through the wind long distances. So we're breathing it in and we're swallowing it.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of time before a bill like the one we were working on passes, because while it was hugely disappointing it didn't pass this year, between now and January 1st, when the Assembly reconvenes, we're going to have a mountain of new evidence on the health impacts.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And, maybe going back to where you started, which is the 10 years and the 50%.
Yeah, I'd like to go back and improve it.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that there will be good reason to. I mean, it's in the soil. Obviously, if it's raining, microplastics and it's in your air, it's all over our agricultural lands.
Yeah.
And these little plastic pieces are being taken up into the plant and into the fruit, whether you're eating lettuce or spinach, or whether you're having tomatoes or peppers, it doesn't matter. They all have these tiny pieces of plastic in them.
I wanted to ask Judith about the chemical recycling thing. That's very interesting to me because, as you know, the plastics industry is making a lot of noise about how plastic can, in fact, be recycled. What did the bill actually say about chemical recycling?
Well, it was incredibly reasonable. The bill in the New York State Legislature did not ban chemical recycling, but it said it could not count toward the recycling requirements of the bill. And it's important, particularly for your listeners in California, to know that the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, filed a really important lawsuit last September suing ExxonMobil for making deceptive statements, not only about plastics recycling, which we know has been an abysmal failure, traditional mechanical recycling, but also for making deceptive statements about chemical recycling, which the industry calls advanced recycling. And it's neither advanced or recycling. It's basically heating plastic at a really high temperature to create new fossil fuel. And then there's one facility that tries to take old waste plastic and turn it into new plastic, generating massive amounts of hazardous waste along the way. So chemical recycling is just the latest false solution. But what it does is it allows the industry to say, we don't need to reduce plastics. Let's just give this so-called new technology a chance.
Oh,
well, they've been
God.
trying it since the 80s and it doesn't work.
Is there a legal definition of the word recycling?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was my next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the bill, the Glick-Harcum bill in New York, has a very strong definition of recycling, and it does not allow for chemical recycling. And then, for other states, there's an existing statute that probably defines what recycling is. And I highly doubt whether chemical recycling meets the definition of recycling.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't meet the common sense. I mean, what everybody perceives as recycling, which is we're going to take this thing and we're going to make something new out of it, new and
Right.
useful, right? That's
As
recycling.
opposed to low-grade fossil fuel or pyrolysis oil. We did a report at Beyond Plastics called Chemical Recycling, a Dangerous Deception. We published it a couple years ago with our friends at IPEN because we wanted to look at, okay, we keep hearing about chemical recycling. How much is really going on in the United States? There were only 11 facilities, and since our report was published, 3 have shut down.
Right.
And let's, wave a magic wand and say the environmental justice issues, the toxics issues, the air quality issues are not a concern. They're only handling about 1% of the nation's plastic waste. So it's not a solution.
Right. So, the ExxonMobil runs one of those, the one in
Yes.
Baytown, Texas. And they claim that they have a proprietary method where they can actually recycle plastic. And it comes up with a completely new material that they
Fossil
can
fuel.
then make into all kinds of new things.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody knows what it is that they're doing, this proprietary method that they have.
Yeah, if you had a high confidence level, you would share that. I think it was either ABC National News or CBS did a segment on the Baytown facility, which folks should
Oh,
Google.
really?
Yeah, about a year ago.
So what's going on in other states, Judith? Anybody else picking up this idea and moving ahead with this same kind of legislation?
Only New Jersey. And he was looking at what New York was doing. And then things are really circling the drain in California. California passed an extended producer responsibility or EPR law a couple of years ago called SB 54. And the state agency out there, Cal Recycle, was poised to put out regulations on that law. And hours before the deadline of putting it out, Governor Gavin Newsom pulled the regulations back, told the agency to stop. They have since released new regulations, which are highly problematic. And then a separate issue related to SB 54 is the state of California has finally banned polystyrene foam products, or know it as styrofoam.
Yeah.
It's a very strong law. Like your stores are not supposed to be selling polystyrene plates or cups, not just restaurants, but also like you shouldn't be able to walk into a Walmart or various stores in California. There's one based in California called Smart and Final. I don't know why that's their name, but if you walk in,
You could have fun with that name.
Yeah.
if you walk in there, you will see like mountains of polystyrene cups and plates still available for sale. Same thing, you can order it through Amazon. So we wrote a letter along with 95 other environmental groups to Governor Gavin Newsom of California saying, the ban took effect January 1st, and you can still buy all of this foam throughout California. Please enforce the law. And we've met with the agency Cal Recycle. We've met with the governor's office. They're not doing anything to enforce the law. It's really, really troubling. And when you have a state like California with a strong law on the books, but a Governor Newsom who is unwilling to simply enforce the law and who at the same time is ripping their already weak extended producer responsibility law into ribbons. It's really troubling. And I think people have so many issues in their brain, on their horizon. There's so much to worry about and work at the federal level. But people need to know that Governor Newsom in California is really weak on plastic pollution issues. And then in New York, we have one man, Speaker Carl Hastie, blocking progress in New York. I don't know what Governor Hochul would have done.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, if Governor Newsom can stop what's going on in California, did we have any assurance that Governor Hochul would be, really supportive and not try to do the same thing in New York?
We have no assurance, but I'm looking forward to the day when both houses of the legislature pass the bill and we get to meet with the governor and her staff and lay it out. We can bring in health experts. We can show how local governments vigorously supported this bill. The city of New York, the Conference of Mayors were real champions. Because why should you and I as taxpayers have to pay to get rid of all of this single-use packaging when it's the producers, the companies that are financially benefiting from selling these goods and packaging, they should be paying rather than taxpayers. If you're a fiscal conservative, you should love this bill.
Right.
Yep.
I was wondering, like in Nassau County, we helped get a bill passed that we wrote actually to ban the sale of styrofoam peanuts. So you can't go to a Staples or an Office Depot or anything in Nassau County and buy that. They're all cornstarch. Everything's made from cornstarch. So I was wondering how many of these small local laws have been passed that, we could put together and say, this is what the counties and the towns and the municipalities across New York State are doing because you're not doing it.
Yeah. There are hundreds across the country. Yeah. And it's everything from plastic bag bans, polystyrene bans. We're doing some work on something called Skip the Stuff. You're not automatically given plastic utensils and condiments and straws. And on Skip the Stuff, I can tell you in New Jersey alone, 24 cities and towns have passed local Skip the Stuff ordinances. Right. Now there's a bill pending at the state level. And also in New York, Westchester County and the city of New York have adopted Skip the Stuff. So I think, the pattern and why local activism is so important is you can work on these bills at the city or county level, and beyondplastics.org has model bills, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you get it adopted locally, and then we climb the ladder and try to get a strong state law adopted after the Local Governments Act.
Yeah.
All right. So, Judith, you've been through the fight of your life, I think, up there in Albany. Are you?
2 years. 2 years in a row.
You sound remarkably upbeat and optimistic. Why is that?
Well, I am. My parents did name me after St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. But this is not a little Catholic humor, but this is not a lost cause. I'm actually optimistic because we have the facts on our side. Right. I'm optimistic because there is an army of grassroots activists working together as a beautiful team trying to get this bill passed. We will keep working hard on this issue. And as I've said, plastic pollution is not going away, and neither are we.
Judith Enck, former EPA Regional Administrator and founder and executive director of the nonprofit Beyond Plastics. You can learn more about Judith and her work at the organization's website, beyondplastics.org. That's going to do it for this edition of Green Street. Many thanks to our friend Judith Enck and to all of you who listen to and support this show. I'm Doug Wood. Patti and I'll be back next week with another edition of Green Street. Thanks for listening.